of the world. The guest speaker was Loung Ung, born in Cambodia, later a refugee who was raised in Vermont. Her story is told in the film First They Killed My Father. It's based on her autobiography. Angelina Jolie is one of the collaborators who brought the story to the screen. It's a Netflix film. It tells the story of the events in Cambodia in the Vietnam era. In the chaos set off by the war across the border, the communist Khmer Rouge began a purge that resulted in death and exile for millions of Cambodians. In my interview with Loung Ung today, I asked where she found the courage to survive and recover.
As a child, when I thought about giving up, I often thought about my parents. I thought about my father's sacrifice. I thought about his courage. I thought about what he did in order for my family and my sibling and I to live, to survive, to have the privilege of taking that next breath. And then I thought about my mother. And I thought how for years I thought the act of her sending me away after the soldiers came for my father was based on her weaknesses. I thought about how when she sent me away as a child into the war zone, not knowing if I would live or die or be raped or be tortured, if she would ever see me again, that she was weak. And it is such an honor to live to be at this age and to know how wrong I was and how strong my mother and my father and my family, and that keeps me going. When I feel weak and vulnerable, I remember that I come from a long line of survivors, that I've come from a long line of fighters, that I cannot dishonor their love and memories and spirits and courage in such a way as to give up and not take that next breath.
Before there was the film First They Killed My Father, there was the autobiography written by Loung Ung. Today I asked her about the experience of writing that book and how it changed her.
When I wrote the book, I let it go. In some way it became not something that just happened in Cambodia, but it was a crimes against humanity. It was a genocide. It was a war crime, and we all suffer as world citizens from it. Whether it's in Rwanda, whether that the genocide or war takes place in Bosnia, El Salvador, in Sierra Leone, or Syria, we all suffer. And so for me, when I wrote it, I really went through a cathartic process of letting go, of not owning the burden, of not owning the trauma, of knowing that it was suffered by a collection of people, many people in our world. So as a result, I was free to not just tell my story, but to tell our story, to tell the Cambodian story and the world story and the child's story and the girl's story. And knowing that when I tell it in this voice, I could then channel the spirits and the strength of many people around the world, so that I didn't have to own it, because if I did, that burden would have been very heavy, and I don't know if I could have done it.
Loung Ung's day in Boston included a tour of Rosie's place, the shelter that has been feeding and housing and serving Boston's homeless for decades. During our interview, one of my questions was about overcoming anger, and the question was a useful reminder of the good that comes from serving others.
For me, you know, anger was so irrational. When I held on to anger, when I worked with anger, when I used anger as a sole part of my voice, I actually hurt myself. There's a Buddhist saying that when you hold on to anger, it's like holding on to a piece of hot coal. You end up burning yourself that much more. And for me, you know, when I held on to anger, you know, I felt it in my shoulders, I felt it in my stomach, and yes, my voice might have come across louder and stronger in some points, but the people listening were at some point would be turned off by the anger. And so I believe that we should go out with the ties, that the strength that binds, the strength of our humanity, of our love, of our courage, of our knowledge that what we do matters. And as an activist and as an adult, this is what drives me, that there are no acts too small that it won't matter in our world, that we all have the power to make a difference in whatever capacity or abilities, whether it's an hour a week or a week a year, or a mission trip, or a letter that you write for Amnesty International, that everything we do matters. And this is how we change a life, how we change our world, and how we make this place a better community for all of us to live in.